The best of times, the worst of times. Tonight, the time of Theresa May, British Prime Minister, has arrived. I'm Brent Goff, and this is The Day.
I have just been to Buckingham Palace, where Her Majesty the Queen has asked me to form a new government, and I accepted. Following the referendum, we face a time of great national change. And I know, because we're Great Britain, that we will rise to the challenge. As we leave the European Union, we will forge a bold, new, positive role for ourselves in the world. And we will make Britain a country that works not for a privileged few, but for every one of us. That will be the mission of the government I lead. And together, we will build a better Britain.
And with those words and a royal blessing, Theresa May takes the reins of British political power. And as a new leader arrives, another leader makes his exit.
It's not been an easy journey, and of course we've not got every decision right. But I do believe that today our country is much stronger.
Welcome to the program, everyone. On the day it became May, Theresa May. She is now the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The Conservative Party leader took over from David Cameron today after a coronation with Queen Elizabeth, the 13th Prime Minister, by the way, that the Queen has welcomed since sitting on the throne. An iconic image here of the Prime Minister with Her Majesty. After May emerged from Buckingham Palace, she spoke for the first time as head of government at a time many consider to be the most difficult since the end of the Second World War. She began a day of surprises by not mentioning Brexit first, instead listing social justice as her main priority.
If you're just managing, I want to address you directly. I know you're working around the clock. I know you're doing your best, and I know that sometimes life can be a struggle. The government I lead will be driven not by the interests of the privileged few, but by yours. We will do everything we can to give you more control over your lives. When we take the big calls, we'll think not of the powerful, but you. When we pass new laws, we'll listen not to the mighty, but to you. When it comes to taxes, we'll prioritise not the wealthy, but you. When it comes to opportunity, we won't entrench the advantages of the fortunate few. We will do everything we can to help anybody, whatever your background, to go as far as your talents will take you.
All right, that is the new British Prime Minister there. We're going to talk about the events of the day. And to do that, I'm joined now by our chief political correspondent, Melinda Crane. She's here at the big table with me, and our correspondent, Barbara Vazel, covering the events in London for us. Good evening to you, Barbara. So, a historic day, we have to say, but Boris Johnson stealing the show this evening.
Yeah, incredible events. Nobody had expected that. When Boris Johnson sort of walked into number 10 Downing Street behind me here, everybody thought, okay, he's going to get some sort of job. But and Theresa May wants him on her team rather than on the outside, you know, heeding the old advice, keep your enemies close. But nobody, absolutely nobody had counted on Boris Johnson bagging the biggest job of all that Theresa May had to give and being made foreign minister. That is extremely interesting, because it shows that Theresa May has a lot of courage and that she sort of does the unexpected, something that many people who had talked about her and her role in office, being Home Secretary for 6 years, had not told about her. Everybody said she's diligent, she works a lot, she's maybe a bit stubborn, she's very straight-laced,
right.
Lots of things, but nobody has said that she might come out with something like that.
I mean, a surprise and a shock for a lot of people. There's also been a lot of criticism about the way she's become Prime Minister. Conservative MPs chose her. The party did not. The membership, the wider membership did not. The British voters did not. Is she going to have a leadership mandate deficit problem to deal with?
She does, of course, in fact, and we have a little demonstration here, a couple of people, not very many, maybe 100, 200 in front of the Downing Street, who have been shouting out, and she's not elected, and we don't want her in office, she has no mandate. And of course, the Labour Party says that, but the Labour Party is in such a bad state at the moment that it can't, it's its own opposition. It can't really do any serious political work as on the other side of the Tories. And also, of course, the contest, the leadership contest within the Conservative Party just broke down. It totally, it evaporated, it imploded, and she was the last woman standing. So obviously she goes into office. How long she can keep this up, how long she will be Prime Minister for, is anybody's guess.
Yeah, and you know, Melinda, Prime Minister May, she was swept into power on this one single issue, Brexit. But she runs the risk of this issue consuming her entire tenure, doesn't she?
Well, she's hoping to be in office until 2020. At the minute, that's what her assumption is. And if the clock starts running on the Brexit application, once they submit that letter, they basically have 2 years. Then possibly, if that were to begin in fall, she would still have a good 2 years following that, if indeed she does remain in office till 2020. And it really was interesting to hear her remarks this evening on the steps of Number 10 Downing, where she emphasized social justice. Right. Clearly, she is taking the Brexit referendum as a referendum about the way that people feel about what their country and their government are doing for them in Britain. In other words, she, a former Home Secretary, a former Interior Minister, essentially, is looking at the domestic side of this and saying, what are the consequences for us as a country, and therefore social justice. So I think, indeed, she will pursue Brexit. She's appointed an extra minister for that purpose. Right. That's David Davies. He was one of those who wanted to leave. He wants to get immigration way, way down. So she's got a minister who's going to take charge of that, and I think she's serious when she talks about those social justice issues.
That's a very interesting read on that. And Barbara, I want to ask you about the move and how she came into power. A quiet planner. Some people saying that her rise to power has been a stealth rise.
You might say that. She has really kept her head down during the whole Brexit campaign. She was one of the Remainers, but she was a very quiet, you can say a stealthy Remainer. And so she really kept sitting on the fence in a way, only to know, and be later to be able to decide which side to jump off. And she has now done that. And in nominating David Davis as Brexit minister, obviously, as Melinda said, that is a very clear signal. It's a signal that she wants to be serious about Brexit, because he is a hard-headed negotiator. He has experience on the European stage, and so he knows what he's doing, and he has some very clear ideas about what he wants for Britain. So it will be not an easy ride for Europe.
Well, Theresa May's first actions as British Prime Minister, they are already provoking strong reactions on social media, especially that decision to appoint Boris Johnson as Foreign Secretary. Many have been posting images of the time that Johnson got stuck on a zip line when he was mayor of London. Dear rest of world, this is Britain's new foreign secretary. We hope you'll now renegotiate favorable trade deals. One comedian writes that with a heavy touch of irony here, phew, just when Britain was starting to become a laughingstock around the world, Boris Johnson is appointed foreign secretary. But novelist Robert Harris, he is looking on the bright side. Boris could be the most amusing foreign secretary since George Brown, who asked a woman in red for a dance and found that she was the Archbishop of Lima. So, what about the German connection to this story? Theresa May and the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, they have quite a bit in common. Both are daughters of clergymen. Merkel's father took the family to minister to the faithful in communist East Germany. May's father was a Church of England vicar. Now, both are academics. Merkel earned a doctorate in quantum physics from Berlin's Academy of Sciences. Theresa May went to Oxford University. She has a degree in geography. Now, both rose to power in unexpected ways. Merkel became chancellor without any regional power base to launch her. She also happens to be the first female head of government in Germany. Theresa May has moved to number 10 Downing following the implosion of the pro-Brexit camp. Now, both women are described as quiet and pragmatic leaders who do their homework. And both are in a position to shape the future of Europe. Merkel, as the most powerful European country, leader of the most powerful European country, and May as Prime Minister of a UK that needs desperately to maintain its relationship with Europe. So, Melinda, let's talk a little bit about where these similarities lead us and what we can glean from them. These women are in leadership positions, but they have different mandates almost, right? We've said that Merkel gets away with a lot of wait and see leading, and Theresa May is in a situation where she has to lead. Is that an accurate read?
Well, I think we don't know that much yet about the way that Theresa May will lead. She's coming from the Home Office. It's an entirely different role than the one that she will now assume as Prime Minister of a country in the midst of a major historic transition. Indeed, it will require strategy. It will require a vision. The degree to which she will be able to come up with those I think is still open to question. She is known, as you said, for being very pragmatic, for being unideological, and certainly we could hear that this evening when she was giving her remarks on social justice. A number of politicians in the UK were tweeting that she's taking a page from Labour's book, that Ed Miliband had made many of the same points about the direction in which England needs to go. Industrial policy, worker representatives on company boards, those are things that Conservatives normally are not in favor of. They're going to be a tough sell for her. Interestingly enough, you might also think she's taking a page from German capitalism, that a number of the things that she highlighted are, in fact, part of Germany's system of moderated capitalism, co-determination, as it's called, the role of labor in the economy. And interestingly enough, like Theresa May, Angela Merkel has been known to steal a page from the opposition's book. So on that level of pragmatism, on that level of being perhaps somebody who's open to taking ideas from wherever they may be arise, there may indeed be similarities between these two women. But as I say, it's very, very early days. Angela Merkel herself has been somewhat scornful of these comparisons, and she had a very cool reaction when she heard about Theresa May's new post. She said, basically, her main job is going to be figuring out what kind of relation the UK wants to have with the EU. So she didn't exactly welcome her with open arms.
That's right. We've even got a soundbite of her saying that. Why don't we take a listen to that?
The task of the new Prime Minister will be to get clarity on what kind of relationship Britain wants to build with the European Union, and in line with the decision by the British people to submit an application for Article 50 of the EU Treaty to the European Council in order to start exit negotiations.
And Barbara, beyond Brexit, I mean, what do we know about May's policies?
We know what she did as Home Secretary. We know that she was quite unideological in some instances, that she did fight for social issues within the Conservative Party, that she was one of the modernizers, really, within the Conservative Party. She said that word some years ago, that the Tories would have to stop being the nasty party. That means only dealing with and working for the upper classes and leaving the rest of the country beside. But she also has been known to be very tough, and once she digs in her heels, she was not very movable, not very flexible then. But as Melinda rightly said, we don't know anything about her in her new office. I mean, that really changes everything, and she might get to a different way of working and thinking there. At least what we saw today from her obviously points to that, because the surprise was Boris Johnson and nominating Phil Hammond as her new Chancellor of the Exchequer shows that she really knows what she wants, and it's a very clear signal.
What about the issue of migration, Melinda?
Well, if it's a question of how does she compare to Angela Merkel, there's a very strong contrast on that particular issue. Theresa May has talked very tough on immigration ever since she became Home Secretary. However, she did not really succeed in bringing migration numbers down. They were still up at 330,000 per year most recently. And in fact, the government under Cameron that she was serving in had promised to get the number way, way down from that. So far, she has found that a very, very challenging task. And of course, that is what she's going to be measured on. Brexit was all about that. Angela Merkel, on the other hand, she found her moment, her vision last year as the refugees were streaming into Germany, and she made it very clear that Germany would maintain an open door policy and would live by its values of integration and diversity. So two very different approaches there on that particular question of open borders.
And May also, as Interior Minister, had a lot of critics on both sides of this issue. Today there were critics, protesters in London talking about her past as Interior Minister. Take a listen to one protester who came out dressed as May in London today.
As the Home Secretary, Theresa May has been one of the most evil politicians since Margaret Thatcher, potentially even more evil. Difficult to say. I have to give her a time to weigh that one up. On a personal level, she's been responsible for the deportation of some of my friends and the detention of other friends who've been living here for years and years and years.
And Barbara, what about both of these leaders becoming the face of the battle of Brexit? I mean, the notion of freedom of movement, freedom of labor movement in the EU, that is something that is it could slap May in the face when negotiations start.
That will be the main breaking point. And that is something that I have the feeling that for now is sort of being fudged. I mean, everybody sort of talks about we need to bring down immigration. And Theresa May has said that. She has done it, as you rightly pointed out. When she was Home Minister, the government Cameron hasn't had any success there and hadn't even really tried. I mean, that was just that was just whitewash. But on the other hand, when you talk to the European Union and you say we want to stay in the common market, but we want to close the doors for Eastern European workers, that is simply not going to work. Even though if Angela Merkel would be ready to make certain concessions to Britain, we will have to ask Poland, we will have to ask Romania, we will have to ask Hungary, and they will just shake their heads and say no. So it's not that easy, and this is really one of the most contentious points in the upcoming negotiations.
Yeah, Melinda, very briefly, yeah.
Basically, Angela Merkel's not going to make significant concessions on that point. Yeah. There are three pillars to the European Union. Mm-hmm. One is the internal market, and we're hearing all of the British leaders, Theresa May included, still saying we have got to have full access to the internal market. Well, sorry, but that goes hand in hand with the other two pillars, and those are free movement of labor within the EU and also paying at least something into the EU budget. Every country, whether it is a full member or whether it has an association agreement, like Norway, like Switzerland, must to some degree agree to that free movement and agree to pay something into the budget. So Angela Merkel said very clearly this week, after hearing that Theresa May would be a candidate, that those cannot be separated, that they remain absolutely inseparable, and that there will be no access to the internal market unless Britain does agree to some amount of free movement. So I think the negotiations promise to be very, very tough indeed.
All right. Melinda Crane, our chief political correspondent, and Barbara Vazel in London covering the story for us tonight. To both of you, thank you very much.